for Liram the Order. The command chamber of the Throne of Stars was silent, except for the soft hum of ancient machines. Fleet Admiral Korvax stood before the great viewing window, his forearms clasped behind his back. Below him, a conquered world burned. Smoke rose from its cities like prayers to gods who would never answer. Another victory for the Velthari Dominion. Another species brought to heel. A chime broke the silence. Korvax turned his scaled head toward the communication sphere floating at the center of the chamber. It glowed with a deep purple light that meant only one thing. The Supreme Conclave was calling. He touched the sphere and knelt as the holographic forms of the seven elders appeared around him. Their ancient faces showed no emotion. They never did. "Rise, Admiral," said the first elder. "We have a new task for you." Korvax stood. In 40 years of service, he had never failed the Conclave. He had crushed rebellions on a dozen worlds. He had broken the backs of species that dared to resist. His name was spoken with fear across 3 spiral arms of the galaxy. "I am honored to serve," he said. The first elder waved a withered hand. A star map appeared in the air between them. It zoomed in on an unremarkable yellow star in an unremarkable corner of space. "Sol system," the elder said. "Third planet. The locals call it Earth." Korvax studied the map. He had heard of this world, a small blue planet filled with water and soft creatures who had barely learned to leave their own atmosphere. Intelligence reports said they were primitive. They fought wars among themselves with chemical explosives and simple projectiles. They had no unified government, no interstellar capability, no threat whatsoever. "You wish me to conquer this world?" Korvax asked. He kept his voice respectful, but inside he felt insulted. This was a job for a junior officer, not the greatest admiral in the Dominion. "The humans have resources we need," the second elder explained. "Their planet is rich in rare minerals. More importantly, they breed quickly. They will make excellent workers for our mining colonies." Korvax nodded slowly. Labor was always needed. The Dominion's expansion required bodies, and bodies wore out quickly in the mines. "How many ships?" he asked. "Take the third expeditionary Armada. 800 vessels should be more than sufficient. 800 warships to conquer a species that had not yet invented faster-than-light travel. It was like using a plasma cannon to kill an insect. But Korvax did not argue. The Conclave had their reasons, and questioning them was unwise. "It will be done," he said. The elders faded away, and Korvax was alone again. He stared at the tiny dot on the star map that represented Earth. Something about this mission bothered him, though he could not say what. Perhaps it was simply boredom. There would be no glory in crushing such weak prey. The door behind him opened, and Sub-Admiral Thera entered. She was younger than Korvax by 2 decades, but she had proven herself in battle many times. Her scales were a darker green than his, and her eyes missed nothing. "I heard about our new orders," she said. "Earth. News travels fast. It always does on this ship." She walked to stand beside him at the window. "I have been reviewing the intelligence files on the humans. And," Thyra was quiet for a moment, "there are gaps." Korvax turned to look at her. "What kind of gaps?" "We have sent 17 surveillance drones to the Sol system over the past 60 years. None have returned. The official reports say they malfunctioned or were destroyed by asteroid impacts." She paused. 17 drones, Admiral, all suffering the same fate?" Korvax considered this. It was strange, certainly. Surveillance drones were built to survive harsh conditions. Losing 1 or 2 might be bad luck. Losing 17 suggested something else. But what? The humans were primitive. Every scan of their planet showed the same thing. Cities of stone and metal. Vehicles that crawled along the ground. Flying machines that could barely reach the upper atmosphere. They posed no threat to Velthari technology. "You worry too much, Thera," he said finally. "The drones were old. The Sol system is far from our supply lines. Equipment fails." "Perhaps," she said, but her voice carried doubt. Korvax placed one of his hands on her shoulder. "I have conquered 40 worlds. I have faced enemies with weapons that could crack moons. These humans cannot even leave their own planet. They are nothing." Thera met his gaze. "Every species we have conquered thought their enemies were nothing once." He removed his hand. Thera's words carried an uncomfortable truth, but he pushed it aside. Doubt was a weakness he could not afford. "Assemble the fleet," he ordered. "We leave in 3 cycles." Thera saluted and left the chamber. Alone again, Korvax turned back to the viewing window. The conquered world below was growing quiet now. The fires were dying. Soon the survivors would be sorted. The useful ones would be sent to labor camps. The rest would be disposed of. It was the way of the Dominion. The strong ruled and the weak served. He thought about Earth, about the blue oceans and green continents he had seen in the surveillance images, about the strange creatures called humans who walked on 2 legs and had only 2 arms. They looked so fragile, so breakable, and yet Thyra's words echoed in his mind. 17 drones, all lost. He pushed the thought away. It meant nothing. The humans were primitive, and primitive species did not destroy Velthari surveillance drones. There had to be another explanation. 3 cycles later, the 3rd Expeditionary Armada gathered in formation above the conquered world. 800 warships, each one capable of destroying a city with a single shot. 2 million soldiers waited in the transport vessels, ready to descend upon Earth like a plague of metal and fire. Korvax stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the fleet assemble. It was a beautiful sight. So much power, gathered in one place. The humans had no idea what was coming for them. "Fleet is ready, Admiral," the navigation officer reported. Korvax allowed himself a small smile. This would be quick. He would crush the humans, claim their world for the Dominion, and return home a hero. Again. "Take us to Earth," he commanded. The stars stretched into lines as the Armada jumped into hyperspace, leaving nothing behind but silence and the slow death of another conquered world. First contact. The Armada emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the Sol system, far beyond the orbit of the outermost planets. Standard procedure demanded caution when approaching unknown territory, even territory belonging to primitive species. Korvax was not a careless commander, but something was wrong. The moment his ships returned to normal space, alarms began screaming across every bridge in the fleet. Sensors detected thousands of objects surrounding them, small satellites, no bigger than a transport shuttle, floating in a vast grid that stretched across millions of kilometers. "Report," Korvax demanded. His sensor officer worked frantically at his console. "Admiral, these objects appear to be detection devices. They are scanning our entire fleet." "Detection devices?" Korvax felt ice form in his stomach. "That is impossible. The humans do not have this technology." "The readings are clear, sir. These satellites are using detection methods I have never seen before. They have already mapped every ship in our Armada." Thyra stepped forward, her face grim. "They knew we were coming." Before Korvax could respond, the communication sphere at the center of the bridge began to glow. Someone was transmitting a message directly to his ship, on a Velthari military frequency. "How did they get our frequency?" the communication officer whispered, her voice shaking. Korvax stared at the glowing sphere. His mind was racing. None of this made sense. The humans were supposed to be primitive. They were supposed to be easy prey. Yet here they were, using Velthari communication codes like they had been studying them for years. "Open the channel," he commanded. The sphere flickered and a holographic image appeared before him. It was a human female, small and soft-looking, with dark hair and eyes that carried no fear whatsoever. She sat in a simple chair, wearing a gray uniform without any military decorations. Behind her, Korvax could see the interior of a spacecraft, though it was unlike any human vessel in the intelligence files. "Good evening, Fleet Admiral Korvax," the human said in perfect Velthari. "My name is Director Chen. On behalf of Earth and its associated territories, I welcome you to the Sol system." The bridge crew froze. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Korvax found his voice. "You speak our language." "We have had nearly a century to learn it," Director Chen replied calmly. "We detected your first surveillance drone when it entered our system 63 years ago. Since then, we have been preparing." 63 years. The full weight of those words crashed over Korvax like a wave. The humans had known about the Dominion for 63 years. They had been watching, learning, Building. Your surveillance drones were very helpful, Chen continued. Their data cores contained everything we needed. Your language, your military tactics, your communication protocols, even the locations of your nearest colonies. She smiled slightly. We tried to send diplomatic missions several times. Your patrol ships destroyed them before they could deliver our messages of peace. You should have surrendered, Korvax growled. That is the only message the Dominion accepts from lesser species. We are aware of your policies, Admiral. We have watched you conquer 17 species over the past 6 decades. We have seen what happens to those who surrender. Her eyes hardened. We chose a different path. Korvax leaned forward in his command chair. You chose death. I have 800 warships. What do you have? A few satellites? A single spacecraft? We have what we needed to build while you were busy conquering others, Chen said. You see, Admiral, that is the flaw in your strategy. You have been so focused on expansion that you never stop to ask a simple question. What happens when you meet a species that had time to prepare? Enough of this, Korvax snarled. He turned to his weapons officer. Destroy her ship. 12 missiles launched from the flagship, streaking toward the small human vessel. They crossed the distance in seconds and struck their target with perfect accuracy, and passed right through. The missiles continued on into empty space. Director Chen's image flickered slightly, then stabilized. A holographic projection, Thera said softly. She was never really here. Very good, Sub-Admiral, Chen said, as if she could hear every word on the bridge. My physical location is quite safe, I assure you, but I am genuinely sorry about what happens next. What happens next is the destruction of your planet, Korvax spat. Director Chen shook her head slowly. No, Admiral. What happens next is that you receive one final chance to save your fleet. She paused, and for a moment, her calm expression cracked. Something that looked like genuine sadness crossed her face. Please understand, I take no pleasure in this. My people wanted peace. We spent decades hoping that first contact would come through diplomacy. We sent messages of friendship to every ship we could reach. All of them were ignored or attacked. She stood from her chair and stepped closer to the projection device. So we prepared for the alternative. We watched your conquests. We studied your methods. We learned that the Velthari Dominion only respects one thing. Her eyes met Korvax directly through the hologram. Strength. You have no strength, Korvax said. You are insects. Then you have nothing to fear from us. Turn your fleet around, Admiral. Go home. Tell your conclave that Earth is not worth the cost. This is your only chance. Korvax laughed. It was a harsh, ugly sound. My only chance? You stand alone against the greatest armada ever assembled, and you offer me chances? Yes, Chen said simply, because once you advance past this point, there will be no more talking, only consequences. I accept your consequences, human. I will enjoy watching your world burn. Director Chen was silent for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was heavy with resignation. We tried, she said quietly. Remember that, Admiral. When this is over, remember that we tried. Her image flickered and vanished. The bridge was silent. Korvax stared at the empty space where her hologram had been. His hearts were beating faster than they should. Something in the human's voice had unsettled him, though he would never admit it. Admiral, Thyra stepped beside him. Orders? Korvax forced himself to straighten in his chair. He was the greatest military commander in the Dominion. He would not be frightened by the words of a primitive. Full advance, he ordered. We continue to Earth. The Armada began to move, 800 ships of war pushing deeper into the Sol system. Behind them, the detection satellites watched in silence. And somewhere ahead, in the darkness between worlds, humanity waited. The Trap Springs. The Armada had been traveling for 6 hours when the first ship vanished. It was a scout vessel at the edge of the formation, a small craft with a crew of 50. One moment it was there on the sensors, transmitting routine data. The next moment it was simply gone. No explosion, no debris, no distress signal. It had been erased from existence. What happened? Korvax demanded, rising from his command chair. Unknown, Admiral, the sensor officer reported, his voice shaking. There was no weapon signature, no energy reading. The ship just stopped existing. Ships do not just stop existing. Before anyone could respond, 2 more vessels disappeared, then 5 more, then 12. Across the fleet, captains began screaming into their communication devices, demanding answers that nobody had. Korvax watched his sensor display with growing horror. Tiny lights representing his ships blinked out one after another, scattered randomly across the formation. There was no pattern, no way to predict which vessel would be next. It was like an invisible hand was reaching into his fleet and plucking ships away. "Shields to maximum," he commanded. "All ships, defensive formation." The Armada tried to regroup, but it was chaos. Captains were panicking. Ships were breaking formation, trying to flee the invisible death. And still, vessels kept disappearing. 50 gone now. 60. 80. "Admiral," Thera pointed at the main viewing screen. "Look." The asteroid belt was ahead of them, a vast field of tumbling rocks that marked the boundary between the inner and outer planets. Korvax had planned to pass through it on the way to Earth. It was supposed to be empty, just dead rocks floating in space. It was not empty. As the Armada approached, the asteroids began to move, not drifting randomly like rocks should, but moving with purpose. Hatches opened in their surfaces, revealing metal underneath. Weapons emerged from hidden compartments. Lights flickered to life across thousands of rocks that were not rocks at all. "They weaponized the entire asteroid belt," Thera whispered. "They turned every rock into a weapons platform." The first shots came a second later. Railgun rounds traveling at impossible speeds tore through Velthari shields like they were made of paper. Missiles launched in swarms so thick they blocked out the stars. Drone ships poured from the fake asteroids, small and fast and utterly ruthless. Korvax watched his beautiful Armada begin to die. "Return fire," he screamed. "Destroy those platforms." The Velthari ships responded with everything they had. Plasma cannons lit up the darkness. Nuclear missiles streaked toward the asteroid defenses. Thousands of platforms exploded into fragments. For a moment, Korvax felt hope. Then he realized the terrible truth. For every platform they destroyed, 10 more activated. The asteroid belt stretched for millions of kilometers, and humanity had been building weapons in it for decades. There was no way to kill them all. "Admiral, contacts behind us." Korvax spun toward the rear display. His blood turned to ice. A human fleet had appeared at their backs, emerging from hidden stations scattered among the outer planets. They had not come from Earth at all. They had been waiting in the darkness the entire time, watching the Velthari walk into their trap. The Armada was surrounded. "Hyperspace jump," Korvax ordered. "All ships, emergency retreat." His navigation officer worked frantically at his console, then looked up with terror in his eyes. "Drives are not responding, Admiral. Something is interfering with our hyperspace generators." "What?" "The human ships are projecting some kind of field. It is blocking our ability to enter hyperspace. We cannot escape." Korvax stared at the tactical display. Enemies in front, enemies behind. His fleet trapped in the middle, being torn apart from all directions. This was not a battle. This was an execution. A transmission came through on the main channel, broadcast to every ship in the Armada. A human male appeared on the screen, wearing a simple military uniform. His face was calm and professional, showing neither anger nor joy, just cold efficiency. "This is Admiral Marcus Webb of the Earth Defense Force," the human said. "To the commander of the Velthari fleet. You are surrounded and outgunned. Your hyperspace drives have been disabled. Your fleet is being systematically destroyed." Korvax listened in silence. Around him, his crew watched with hollow eyes. "You were not invading Earth," Admiral Webb continued. "You were walking into a trap we have spent 80 years building. Every asteroid in this belt is a weapon. Every moon in this system hides a defense station. We have been waiting for you since before most of your crew was born." The transmission showed a tactical display from the human perspective. Korvax saw his own fleet as the humans saw it, a shrinking cluster of lights surrounded by an ocean of red enemy markers. So many enemies. How had the humans built so many weapons without anyone noticing? "I am offering you one opportunity to surrender," Webb said. "Power down your weapons and lower your shields. Your crews will be taken prisoner and treated humanely. This is not negotiable. You have 5 minutes to decide. The transmission ended. Korvax looked at Thera. She looked back at him with eyes that held no hope. "What do we do, Admiral?" she asked. He did not answer. He could not answer. His entire career, he had been the hunter. He had been the one offering others the choice between submission and death. Now the roles were reversed, and he understood at last how his victims had felt. Terrified, helpless, trapped. "Admiral," Thera said again, more urgent this time, "we need orders." Korvax forced himself to speak. "We fight. We are Velthari. We do not surrender to primitives." But even as he gave the order, he knew it was hopeless. The humans were not primitives. They had never been primitives. They had been predators, lying in wait, letting the Dominion believe they were weak. And now the trap had closed. The battle continued to rage around them, but it was no longer a battle. It was a slaughter, and Korvax could do nothing but watch his fleet die. The slaughter. The killing continued for 9 hours. Thera watched from the bridge of the crippled flagship as the Third Expeditionary Armada was systematically dismantled. Human weapons operated on principles that Velthari science could not explain. Energy beams that passed through shields as if they did not exist. Kinetic rounds that struck with the force of small moons. Electronic attacks that turned Velthari ships against each other, making them fire on their own allies. It was not war. It was extermination. Admiral Korvax had stopped giving orders hours ago. He sat in his command chair, staring at nothing, his forearms hanging limp at his sides. The fire in his eyes had gone out. The greatest military commander in the Dominion had been broken. Around them, the crew worked in desperate silence, trying to keep the flagship alive. But everyone knew it was only a matter of time. "Sub-Admiral," the sensor officer said quietly, "I am detecting a damaged human destroyer at bearing 73. Its engines appear to be disabled." Thera turned to look at the display. The human ship was drifting, separated from its fleet. A rare opportunity. "Can we reach it?" she asked. "If we divert all remaining power to engines, yes. But we would have no shields, no weapons." Thera considered this. The flagship was already dying. In an hour, maybe 2, the humans would finish them off. But if she could board that destroyer, if she could capture it and study its technology, perhaps the knowledge could be sent back to the Dominion. Perhaps something could be salvaged from this disaster. "Do it," she ordered. The flagship lurched toward the damaged destroyer. No human ships moved to stop them. Perhaps they did not notice. Perhaps they did not care. There were so few Velthari ships left that one more hardly mattered. The boarding was quick and brutal. Thera led 50 soldiers through the destroyer's hull breach, expecting fierce resistance. What she found instead shocked her. The ship was nearly empty. They moved through corridor after corridor, finding only automated systems and silent machines. Where were the crew? A vessel this size should hold hundreds of soldiers. Finally, in the command center, they found them. 12 humans, all wounded, defending their posts with small weapons. They fought bravely but briefly. Within minutes, 11 were dead. Only one remained alive. A young male with burns across half his face. Thera's soldiers dragged him before her. He looked up at her without fear, just exhaustion and a grim acceptance of his fate. "Where is the rest of your crew?" Thera demanded. The human coughed blood and almost smiled. "You are looking at it." "Impossible. This ship is massive. It requires hundreds of crew." "Not our ships." The human gestured weakly at the walls around them. "Almost everything is automated. Artificial intelligence handles navigation, targeting, damage control. We just supervise." Thera stared at him. A warship crewed by only 12 beings? The Velthari used thousands to operate vessels half this size. How advanced were these humans? "Why?" she asked. "Why did you build all of this? Why did you prepare for so long?" The human was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was soft but steady. "Because we were watching." "Watching what?" "Everything. Your civilization, your conquests. We detected your signals decades ago. We saw what you did to other species, the enslavement, the destruction, the way you treated anyone weaker than yourselves." He met her eyes directly. "We knew you would come for us eventually. Every species in this region of space knew. The Velthari Dominion only stops when it is stopped. Thera felt something cold settle in her chest. So you build all of this just to fight us? We build all of this to survive. The human coughed again. You need to understand something, Sub-Admiral. Humans are not like the species you have conquered before. We do not have natural weapons. No claws, no armor, no venom. We are soft and weak compared to most intelligent life in the galaxy. Then how did you defeat us? The human almost laughed. It turned into a wet cough. Because we learned early that the universe wants to kill us. Our own planet tried to kill us for thousands of years. Disease, famine, predators, natural disasters. And we survived all of it. Not because we were strong, but because we refused to die. He paused, gathering his strength. When we realized what was out there in the stars, we did not panic. We did not hide. We built. We prepared. We decided that when the wolves finally came to our door, they would not find sheep waiting for them. His eyes hardened despite his wounds. They would find something worse. Worse than wolves? Thyra asked. Much worse. The human smiled with bloody teeth. Survivors. The kind that build traps 80 years in advance. The kind that turn an entire solar system into a fortress. The kind that do not stop until the threat is eliminated. An explosion rocked the destroyer. Thera's soldiers looked nervous. The humans must have realized one of their ships had been boarded. You should go, the human said. Take what you learned back to your fleet. If any of your fleet survives. Thera looked at him for a long moment. She could kill him now. It would be quick, merciful even. Instead, she turned to her soldiers. Leave him. Back to the flagship. They ran through the corridors, reaching their boarding craft just as human reinforcements arrived. The shuttle launched into space, weaving through debris and weapons fire. Behind them, the captured destroyer exploded, destroying itself rather than letting its technology fall into enemy hands. Thera watched it burn from the shuttle window. Around her, the battle was ending. Less than 50 Velthari ships remained. The rest were debris clouds and frozen corpses drifting in the void. They had come to conquer a primitive species. Instead, they had met something ancient and terrible. A species that had been preparing for war since before the first Velthari ship reached the stars. And now Thera realized they had to tell the Dominion what they had found, if anyone survived to deliver the message. The message. The flagship drifted near Earth's moon, its engines dead and its hull torn open in a dozen places. Of the 800 ships that had entered the Sol system, 47 remained. Most of those had surrendered. The rest were too damaged to fight. Admiral Korvac sat alone on the bridge. His crew had been evacuated to the lower decks, where life support still functioned. Only emergency lights remained, casting red shadows across the empty stations. He had failed. Not just failed, but failed completely. 2 million soldiers, 800 warships, the pride of the Velthari Dominion. All of it destroyed by a species that was supposed to be primitive. The communication sphere flickered to life. Korvax did not even look up. Admiral Korvax, a familiar voice said. Permission to come aboard? He raised his head slowly. Director Chen's face floated in the hologram, but this time there was something different. This time she looked tired, almost as tired as he felt. You are asking permission? He said bitterly. You could simply destroy what remains of my ship. We could, Chen agreed, but that is not why we fought. We fought to survive, Admiral, not to conquer. There is a difference. 20 minutes later, a human shuttle docked with the flagship. Korvax remained on the bridge waiting. He heard footsteps approaching through the dark corridors. Then the door opened and Director Chen entered. She was smaller in person than her hologram had suggested. A tiny creature, barely reaching Korvax's chest. She wore the same gray uniform, and she carried no visible weapons. Behind her came 4 human soldiers in heavy armor, but they stayed at the door. Chen walked across the bridge and stopped a few meters from Korvax. For a long moment, they simply looked at each other. The conqueror and the defender. The hunter and the trap maker. You are not gloating, Korvax observed. Should I be? You destroyed my fleet. You killed nearly 2 million of my soldiers. Most victors would celebrate. Chen shook her head slowly. I am too tired to celebrate, Admiral, and too sad. She gestured at the viewing window, where the blue and white sphere of Earth hung in the darkness. Do you know how many people live on that world? Our intelligence said 12 billion. 14 billion now. 14 billion people who have never known war with another species. 14 billion people who grew up hoping that when we finally met other intelligent life, it would be peaceful. Her voice carried genuine pain. I have spent my entire career preparing for this battle. 40 years of building weapons, training soldiers, planning strategies, and every single day, I hoped I would never have to use any of it. Korvax did not know how to respond. Velthari did not think this way. Victory was glory. Conquest was honor. The strong took from the weak because that was the natural order. Why did you let us live? He asked. You could have destroyed every ship. Why accept surrenders? Because we are not you, Chen said simply. We do not murder prisoners. We do not enslave the defeated. We fight when we must, but we do not enjoy it. She paused. And because dead soldiers cannot carry messages. Messages? Chen reached into her uniform and pulled out a small data device. She held it out to Korvax. This contains everything. The full record of this battle. The technical specifications of our defense systems. The complete history of how we prepared for your arrival. She pressed it into his four-fingered hand. Take it back to your conclave. Show them what happened here. Make them understand. Korvax stared at the device. Understand what? That Earth is not a conquest. It is not a resource. It is not a stepping stone for your expansion. Chen's eyes met his directly. It is a line. Any fleet that crosses it will meet the same fate as yours. We will destroy them utterly, just as we destroyed you. You cannot fight the entire Dominion. Can we not? Chen smiled sadly. We had 80 years to prepare for this battle, Admiral. We knew exactly how many ships you would send because we had been watching your fleet movements for decades, and we built just enough weapons to defeat you. She let that sink in. How many weapons do you think we could build if we had another 80 years? How much stronger do you think we could become? Korvax felt cold despite himself. The humans had held back. This devastating defeat, this complete annihilation of the greatest armada in Velthari history, and they had held back. But we are also offering something else, Chen continued. Peace, trade, cooperation. The Dominion can be the first species to treat humanity as equals instead of prey. We would share our technology, our knowledge, our resources. We could be allies instead of enemies. The Conclave will never accept that, Korvax said. They will see this as a challenge. They will send more ships. Then more ships will die. Chen shrugged. We will be waiting. We will always be waiting. But the offer remains open, Admiral. Peace is possible. It is always possible, right up until someone chooses war. She stepped back toward the door. The human fleet will escort your surviving ships to the edge of our system. You will be allowed to leave with your wounded and your dead. We ask only that you deliver our message to your leaders. And if I refuse, then someone else will deliver it. Chen paused at the door. But I think you understand now, Admiral. You understand what we are. And I think part of you respects it. She was right. Korvax did not want to admit it, but she was right. He had conquered 40 worlds, defeated dozens of enemies, broken the spirits of countless species. But he had never faced anything like this. A species that had seen death coming for decades and simply refused to accept it. I will deliver your message, he said. Chen nodded. Thank you. Admiral, I hope we never meet again. But if we do, I hope it is as friends. She left, and Korvax was alone again. Hours later, Thera found him still sitting on the bridge, staring at the data device in his hand. Admiral, she said, the humans are ready to escort us out of the system. What do we tell the Conclave when we return? Korvax was silent for a long moment. Through the viewport, Earth was growing smaller as the flagship limped toward open space. Such a small world, such fragile-looking creatures, and yet they had crushed the greatest military force the Dominion had ever assembled. We tell them the truth, Korvax said finally. We tell them that we found something out here we were never meant to find. He looked at Thera, and for the first time since the battle began, His eyes held something other than defeat. They held warning. And we tell them that it let us live. The stars stretched into lines as the survivors jumped into hyperspace, leaving Sol behind. Earth turned slowly in the darkness, blue and green and white, peaceful and silent, waiting, always waiting.